3 years ago, I almost died on the delivery table. We lost the baby, and Jackson collapsed outside the operating room, sobbing on his knees until he couldn't breathe. For the next 3 years, he was the perfect husband. Devoted. Attentive. He treated me like a piece of fragile porcelain that might shatter at any moment. Yet the procreation system bar in my mind remained stubbornly stuck at 99%. I started to believe the mission would never be completed, that I was destined to haunt this world forever, tethered to a ghost. On the 3rd anniversary of our child's death, I went to the cemetery alone. Afterward, needing to clear the suffocating grief from my lungs, I took a drive down to the coast. I was walking along the dunes when a small boy, maybe 4 years old, collided with my legs. He tumbled back into the sand. I knelt down, reaching out to help him. "Hey there, little guy. Are you okay? Where are your parents?" He scrambled up, shoved my hand away with a scowl, and sprinted off toward a cluster of palm trees. I followed him, my maternal instincts kicking in, mostly just wanting to make sure he found his family. But as I rounded the bend, the blood in my veins turned to ice. Under the shade of the palms, Jackson was lounging on a beach chair. He looked more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. He laughed as he caught the boy in a mid-air hug. "Daddy." The boy squealed. And the woman the boy turned to, the one he called Mommy, was Isla Bennett, my best friend, my bridesmaid. Sitting next to them were my own parents, laughing as they held out a cup of coconut water to the child. "Come here, Cooper. Let Grandma hold you for a second," my mother cooed. My father took a sip of his drink and sighed, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "Summer is probably at the grave today. Poor girl. If she only knew that Cooper was actually..." "Dad." Jackson cut him off sharply, covering Cooper's ears. "Don't. Summer owes this to Isla. This child is the debt she had to pay." I dug my nails into my palms, my vision blurring. I blinked, praying it was a heat stroke hallucination. But then the cold, synthesized voice I hadn't heard in years rang in my head. "Host identity confirmed. This is the child you gave birth to 3 years ago. Mission status. Procreation task complete. Do you wish to initiate world extraction?" My brain went numb. I stood there, paralyzed, as the world I thought I knew disintegrated. "Daddy, Mommy, that lady over there helped me up," Cooper said, pointing toward me. Jackson and Isla turned. The smiles slid off their faces as if they'd been slapped. "Summer." Jackson's voice was a strangled ghost of itself. He instinctively tried to pull Cooper behind his back, shielding him from my sight. A bitter burn rose in my throat. "Don't hide him, Jackson. Don't you think I deserve an explanation?" He took a deep, shaky breath, his eyes darting to my parents, then back to me. The facade crumbled, replaced by a cold, defensive resolve. "Since you've seen him, there's no point in lying anymore," he said. "Yes. Cooper is your son. I lied to you. We told you he died in the NICU." Isla's face went deathly pale. She gripped Cooper's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "Summer, please don't blame Jackson. It was my fault. All of it." She suddenly pushed Cooper toward me, her voice trembling with performative martyrdom. "Cooper, go to her. That's your real mother." The boy burst into frantic tears, scrambling back to Isla. "No. I don't want her. Mommy, I only want you. Don't let the scary lady take me." He clung to Isla's waist, and she pulled him into her arms, sobbing as if I were the villain in a Disney movie. In the eyes of my parents, I became the aggressor. "Summer." My mother stepped forward, physically blocking me from Isla and the boy. "Don't you dare try to break them up. Your father and I agreed to this." My voice shook so hard I could barely form words. "You knew? Both of you. You knew my son was alive this whole time." My mother looked away. A flicker of shame quickly replaced by indignation. "It's your own fault. If you hadn't insisted on that skiing trip back then, Isla wouldn't have been injured trying to save you. She lost her ability to have children because of you, Summer. Giving her this child was only right. It was justice." Justice? I remembered that trip. Isla had tripped on a flat trail. Her permanent injury was a lie she'd used for years to milk my guilt. She'd actually lost her fertility due to a botched procedure years before I even met her. She bit her lip, refusing to meet my eyes. I remained silent, which my mother took as a sign of submission. "It's been 3 years, my mother continued. "Let it go. You and Jackson can always have another one. We've been coming here every weekend to see Cooper. Isla is a natural, she's gentle, she's patient. You've done nothing but mope and cry for 3 years. She's a better mother than you could ever be." My father nodded in solemn agreement. "Isla has been like a second daughter to us. We've already legally adopted her into the family. Just think of her as a sister. And Cooper, if you really can't let go, you can be his aunt. That's fair, isn't it?" Looking at their perfect family unit, I felt the last warmth in my soul vanish. I started to laugh, a jagged, broken sound that turned into tears. My son, whom I nearly died for, belongs to her. My husband treats her like his wife. And my parents, you've replaced me. I pointed at Isla, my whole body trembling. When I was screaming in the middle of the night, when I was contemplating ending it all because the grief was too much, were you happy? Did you feel like you'd won? Summer. Jackson snapped, looking at me with disapproval. Isla had nothing to do with the logistics. If you want to hate someone, hate me. Leave her out of it. The taste of copper filled my mouth. I leaned against a nearby tree to keep from collapsing and summon the system. Confirm extraction, I whispered in my mind. I don't want to stay here for another second. The system flickered. Extraction sequence initiated. Physical departure scheduled in 72 hours via terminal exit. I looked at Cooper. I saw my own eyes in his small face, the shape of my jaw. Despite the rage, a sliver of hope remained. I knelt down one last time and held out my hand. Cooper, I said softly. I'm your mommy. Do you want to come home with me? He took a step toward me. I allowed myself a tiny, tragic smile. Then he picked up a heavy plastic truck from the sand and hurled it at my face. It caught me right on the cheekbone. You're trying to steal my daddy, he screamed. I only have one mommy. I hate you. Go away, you mean lady. My cheek stung, swelling instantly. Isla rushed forward, scooping Cooper up with a protective, panicked air. Summer, he's just a child. He didn't mean it. Please don't hit him. My mother shoved me back, acting like a hen protecting her brood. He's a baby. You can't just come in here and start barking about being his real mother. Cooper buried his face in Isla's neck, wailing uncontrollably. Jackson's patience snapped. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight and bruising, and began dragging me toward the parking lot. He's terrified of you. Look what you're doing to him. Just get out of here. He hailed a taxi, shoved me into the back seat, and slammed the door. As the car pulled away, I looked through the rear window. I saw Jackson, Isla, and my parents huddled together, all of them focused on soothing the boy. I was the intruder. I was the ghost. When I got back to our house, the house that was a monument to a lie, I began to pack. I didn't have much. An album fell out of the back of the closet. I opened it, and my heart stopped. Photos of Cooper. His first month. His first birthday. Christmas. Every milestone. In every single photo, Jackson and Isla were holding the child, flanked by my parents. On the back of one, in my mother's elegant script, were the words, Family Portrait 2023. For 3 years, they had lived a parallel life. And I was the only one kept in the dark. At the very back of the album, I found a hidden USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop, my hands shaking. The first thing I heard was the wedding march. The video showed Jackson and Isla standing in front of my parents' backyard gazebo. My parents were giving a speech. Isla has been a part of this family since she was a girl. We are so happy to see her and Jackson finally find their happiness together. The camera cut to the dressing room. Isla looked radiant in white. Jackson, she whispered, what if Summer comes home early? Jackson was pinning a veil into her hair, his expression softer than I'd ever seen it. She won't. She's at the cemetery today. She always stays there until sunset. Today is for us. I hit pause. I looked at the date. It was last year, on the anniversary of the day I thought I lost my son. While I was sobbing over a cold headstone, they were saying, I do. The album hit the floor just as the bedroom door swung open. Jackson walked in, saw the mess, and his face hardened into a mask of fury. Summer, what are you doing? Are you really going to throw a tantrum over some photos? I looked at him, the hatred burning behind my eyes. Why? Why did you do this to me? Why did you build your happiness on the wreckage of my life? Jackson saw the video playing on the screen. The fire in his eyes died out instantly. He ran a hand through his hair, stepping toward me with a look of exasperated pity. It already happened, Summer. Couldn't you just have stayed ignorant? It was better that way. Better for who? I was just helping Isla fulfill her dream of being a bride, he said, as if he were explaining a charitable donation. You're the one I live with. You're the one I love. Cooper is better off with her. We'll have our own kids, okay? Let's just start over. He reached for me, trying to lift me onto the bed, his touch suddenly possessive and demanding. Slap. The sound echoed in the room. He stumbled back, clutching his cheek in disbelief. You hit me. I pushed him away, the last shred of my heart turning to ash. Jackson, I want a divorce. Get out. He let out a sharp, condescending laugh. Don't say things you'll regret. You're emotional. Isla and I, it's not what you think. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor changed. Mr. Reed? This is St. Jude's Hospital. Isla Bennett has been admitted. Before the person on the other end could finish, Jackson was out the door. He didn't even look back. I watched his car speed away. The system pinged in my mind. Countdown 48 hours remaining. Jackson didn't come home that night. I fell into a restless sleep, only to be jolted awake by the acrid smell of smoke. The room was an orange blur. Flames were licking at the curtains, climbing the walls. Help! I screamed, lunging for the door. The handle wouldn't turn. It was locked from the outside. I hammered on the wood. Mom. Dad. Jackson. Somebody. Then I heard a small voice through the crack in the door. Why are you trying to take me away? Why did you make Mommy cry? It was Cooper. I'm going to burn the bad lady, he whispered, his voice chillingly calm. So Mommy can be happy again. I peered through the gap. I saw the boy standing in the hallway, clutching a lighter, his eyes filled with a terrifying, learned hatred. Cooper, you set the fire? My lungs burned. He grinned. Nobody likes you anyway. You deserve to burn. The smoke was thick now, black and suffocating. I collapsed to my knees, coughing violently. The system flashed red. Host, hold on. Jackson is almost here. A moment later, the door was kicked off its hinges. Jackson charged through the smoke, a fire extinguisher in one hand. He dropped it and scooped me up, his arms trembling as he carried me out of the inferno. When I opened my eyes, everything was white. Sterile. Jackson was sitting by my bed, his head in his hands. He looked exhausted. You're awake. The doctor said you'll be okay. Minor smoke inhalation. He handed me a glass of water. Don't be mad at Cooper. He's just a kid. He was scared you were going to take him away from the only home he knows. My voice was a raspy whisper. He tried to kill me, Jackson. Isla raised him to be a murderer. Doesn't she have to answer for that? Jackson's face darkened. Enough. You're just looking for ways to blame Isla. If you hadn't threatened the boy yesterday, he wouldn't have snapped. I stared at him. The sheer absurdity of his logic drained the last of my energy. There was no point in arguing with a man who had already decided I was the problem. Leave, I said, closing my eyes. I'm tired. He didn't move. I felt his hand wrap around my wrist, his grip desperate. Isla was diagnosed with acute leukemia, he rasped. His eyes were bloodshot, pleading. While you were unconscious, I had the doctors run a compatibility test. You're a perfect match, Summer. He leaned in, his voice a pathetic whimper. Please, save her. For Cooper's sake. He can't lose his mother. I ripped my hand away, staring at him in horror. You want me to give a piece of my body to the woman who stole my life? To the woman who helped my son try to kill me? He hung his head, his voice cracking. I know I've failed you, but Isla is so young. Cooper needs her. If you do this, I'll do anything. Anything you want. I felt a sob rise in my chest. Jackson had never begged me for anything. Not once in our marriage. And here he was on his knees for her. Get out, I hissed. This is her karma. Let her rot. Slap. The blow caught me across the face, the same cheek Cooper had hit with the truck. My head snapped to the side. Jackson froze, his hands still midair. Summer. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I didn't cry. I just started hitting him back, swinging wildly, raining blows on his chest and face. He didn't fight back. He just stood there and took it. When I finally stopped, he was trembling. Isla isn't the other woman, Summer. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was a red marriage certificate sitting next to a set of divorce papers. The divorce papers had my signature on them. I filed these 3 years ago so I could put Isla on Cooper's birth certificate as the mother, he whispered. We've been legally married for years. I forged your name. My heart seemed to stop beating. What? Technically, he said, unable to look me in the eye. In the eyes of the law, you're the one who doesn't belong here. I stared at him, the room spinning. I fell back against the pillows, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat until it turned into a jagged sob. You'll regret this, Jackson. I hope you realize what you've done. I closed my eyes and spoke to the system. Can I choose the manner of my death? When it confirmed, I looked at Jackson. Fine. I'll do the donation. He grabbed my hand, his eyes filling with tears of relief. Summer. I knew you still loved me. I promise this is the last time. After the surgery, I'll distance myself from her. It'll just be us. I swear. I looked into his eyes, seeing the hollow man he had become. I have one condition. Anything. I want a public confession. I want you to post on every social media platform you have, admitting that you stole my child, that you cheated, and that you forged the divorce. You tell the world exactly what you did. Then I'll save her. Jackson hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. Fine. If that's what it takes. I kicked him out of the room. System, I thought. I want to die on the operating table. I want him to live with the knowledge that he forced me into the grave. The night before the surgery, I could hear laughter coming from the room next door. Jackson was playing with Cooper, making Isla laugh. My parents were there, too. It's lucky Summer is a match, I heard my mother say. It's the least she can do to pay Isla back for everything. I looked at the silver bracelet on my wrist, a charm I'd bought when I was pregnant, a prayer for my baby's safety. I took it off and dropped it into the trash can. My phone started blowing up with notifications. Jackson had posted his confession. It was my fault. I destroyed my family. I betrayed Summer. My friends, my colleagues, Everyone was messaging me in shock. But I felt nothing. Just a cold, heavy numbness. A knock at the door. My mother walked in, carrying a thermos. I made you some soup. You need your strength for tomorrow. I looked at her. The woman who used to fight my teachers if they were unfair to me, now a stranger. Mom. What if I don't make it out? Oh, stop being so dramatic, she snapped, though she didn't look me in the eye. You're just trying to make us feel guilty, so you don't have to donate. You promised. Don't go back on your word. We'll all be a happy family again after this, you'll see. My father sighed from the doorway. Just do this, Summer. Then you and Jackson can move on. Countdown 12 hours. The next morning, the nurses came for me. As they wheeled me toward the OR, Jackson caught my hand. When you wake up, everything will be better. We'll be okay. I didn't answer. As the anesthesia took hold, the bright lights of the OR began to fade. Doctor, her blood pressure is plummeting. She's hemorrhaging. Get the crash cart. Now. I drifted in the gray space between worlds, hearing the system's final countdown. Extraction sequence complete. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The long, flat tone of the heart monitor was the last thing I heard. My soul pulled away, rising above the chaos. The door swung open. A nurse rushed out, covered in blood. Where is Summer Reed's family? Jackson sprinted toward her. Is she okay? Can I see her? She's in shock. There was a massive hemorrhage. We're doing everything we can, but you need to prepare for the worst. Jackson's face went white. What are you talking about? It was a routine harvest. How could this happen? The nurse was sweating, her eyes wide. Sir, why didn't you disclose her medical history? She had a severe, underlying lung infection, likely from smoke inhalation. Her system was already compromised. She never should have been cleared for surgery. Jackson froze. The fire? We've lost her. The lead surgeon stepped out, pulling off his mask. His face said it all. I'm sorry. We did everything we could. Behind him, my mother let out a strangled cry and collapsed against the wall. No, Jackson whispered. No, that's not possible. They wheeled me out a few minutes later. A white sheet pulled over my face. Jackson stood there, paralyzed, unable to touch the shroud. My mother threw herself over my body, wailing. My baby. Summer. How could you leave us? The surgeon handed Jackson a report. Mr. Reed, her lungs were in terrible shape. Why wasn't this reported? Who performed her intake exam? Jackson stared at the paper. We went to the local clinic after the fire. They said she was fine. Then he remembered. He had been on the phone with Isla's doctors the whole time. Cooper had been the one to run out and tell him. The doctor said she's okay. Jackson hadn't even bothered to look at the discharge papers himself. Cooper wandered over from the waiting area, looking confused. Grandma, what's wrong? My mother grabbed the boy's hands, her face streaked with tears. Cooper, this was your mother. Your real mother. And she's gone. Is she dead? Cooper asked. His voice was flat. My mother nodded, sobbing. Honey, give her a kiss goodbye. Tell her you're sorry. But Cooper didn't cry. He started to clap. A high, shrill sound that echoed through the sterile hallway. Yay, she's dead. The mean lady is gone. The sound of Cooper's small, fleshy palms slapping together bounced off the linoleum walls with the sickening clarity of a gunshot. Clap, clap, clap. Yay, she's dead. The mean lady is gone. Two passing nurses froze in their tracks, trays of sterile vials clattering against their carts. The lead surgeon, Dr. Vance, looked down at the boy with an expression of profound, chilling horror. In 30 years of medicine, Vance had seen grief in every permutation, denial, rage, catatonia, hysteria. But he had never seen a 4-year-old child beam with angelic delight over the freshly shrouded corpse of the woman who had just died. To save his family. Cooper, stop, my mother whispered. Her voice was cracked, paper-thin. He reached out with trembling, liver-spotted hands to grab the boy's shoulders. Cooper, baby, don't say that. That's your mother. She gave you life. Cooper twisted out of her grip, his little face scowling with pure, unadulterated disgust. She's not my mommy. Mommy Isla is pretty. That lady was ugly and smelly, and she yelled at Daddy. I told you I burned her room so she would go away. It worked. Jackson didn't move. He stood 3 feet from the gurney, his white dress shirt stained with sweat and soot from the previous night's blaze. What did you say? Jackson's voice was barely audible, a dry, raspy wheeze that scraped the bottom of his throat. Cooper looked up at his father, his chest puffed out, seeking the praise he had always received for being Isla's loyal little protector. I used the yellow lighter from the kitchen. I lit the curtains like Mommy showed me when we burn the scented candles. I locked the door so she couldn't come out. The hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dr. Vance's head snapped toward Jackson. Mr. Reed, did your child just confess to intentional arson? No, Jackson choked out, his eyes wide and bloodshot, darting frantically between the doctor, the white sheet, and his son. No, he's 4. Doesn't know what he's saying. He's confused. I'm not confused. Cooper stamped his light-up sneaker against the floor, a red LED flashing rhythmically in the rubber sole. Mommy said the mean lady was stealing our house. Mommy said if the mean lady wasn't here, we could have cake every day. My mother's knees gave out entirely. She hit the floor with a dull, heavy thud, her manicured fingers clawing at the hem of the sheet covering my face. No, 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 she wailed, rocking back and forth. Summer, wake up. Tell Mommy you're joking. You always were dramatic, baby, please, just open your eyes. We'll take Cooper back. We'll tell Isla to leave. Just get off that table. She pulled at the white cloth. Beneath it, the shell I had abandoned lay motionless. My skin was the color of skim milk tinged with the faint bluish-gray hue of massive circulatory collapse. The lips that had once begged them for an explanation were parted, slightly cold and rubbery. My father stood behind my mother, his hands jammed deep into his trouser pockets. His jaw worked silently, chewing on air, his eyes glassy and unblinking. Doctor, my father said, his voice flat, stripped of all inflection. The donation, did it work? Is Isla going to be okay? Dr. Vance looked at my father as if he were a specimen under a microscope. There was no donation, Mr. Reed, the surgeon said coldly. The patient went into refractory hemorrhagic shock during the initial trocar placement. Her vascular bed collapsed due to acute hypoxemia. Her lungs were filled with soot and carbonaceous debris. We didn't harvest a single viable stem cell. We spent 50 minutes trying to restart a heart that had zero circulating volume. He pulled off his surgical cap and tossed it into the biohazard bin with a wet slap. Your daughter died for nothing. In room 412 of the oncology pavilion, Isla Bennett was sitting up in bed, sipping ice water from a plastic cup with a bendy straw. She had her hair braided neatly over one shoulder, wearing a pale blue silk robe that Jackson had bought her for her birthday. When the door swung open, her face instantly rearranged itself into the fragile, saintly mask she had worn for 7 years. Jackson, she murmured, her voice sweet and breathy. Is it over? Did she give the marrow? I feel so terrible, making her go through that. Jackson walked into the room. He didn't look like the confident, handsome executive who had pinned a veil into her hair while I was crying at an empty cemetery. His eyes were sunken, dark purple rings bruised into the hollows beneath them. His hands were shaking so violently that he couldn't slide them into his pockets. Behind him walked my father, carrying Cooper. Isla, Jackson said. His voice was a flat line. Where is she? Isla looked past his shoulder toward the empty hallway, her eyes glittering with a sharp, calculating curiosity. Is she resting in recovery? I should go thank her. I want to bring Cooper to see her, so she knows we don't hold any grudges about her yelling at the beach. Summer is dead, Jackson said. The plastic cup slipped from Isla's fingers. Ice water spilled across the white duvet, soaking into the cotton, dripping down the side of the hospital bed onto the floor. Drip, drip, drip. What? Isla blinked, a strange, nervous flutter touching the corner of her left eye. Jackson, don't joke like that. That's not funny. The doctors said it was a routine harvest. It's just a needle in the pelvic bone. Her lungs failed, Jackson said, stepping closer to the bed. His voice was rising now, cracking at the edges like brittle glass. Her lungs were burned. From the smoke, Isla. The smoke from the fire in our bedroom. Isla's breath caught in her throat. Her gaze flicked instantly to Cooper, who was busy playing with a plastic dinosaur on my father's arm. The fire. It was an accident, Isla whispered, pulling the wet blanket up to her chin. The wiring in that old house. Cooper told the police he lit the curtains, Jackson interrupted. The room went dead silent. Isla's face lost every drop of its remaining color. The delicate, rose petal flush she always maintained turned the color of wet cement. He's a child, Jackson, she stammered, her voice losing its melodic cadence, turning sharp and defensive. He was scared. He heard us talking about how Summer was threatening to take him away. You can't hold a 4-year-old responsible for. And the marrow? Jackson took another step forward, looming over the bed. His shadow fell across her like a shroud. They didn't get it, Isla. Her heart stopped before they could extract the cells. There is no donor. There is no backup match. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. You have 4 weeks before your blast count reaches the terminal threshold. And the only person on this planet who shared your HLA antigen profile is currently lying in the basement morgue in a black plastic bag. Isla stared at him, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The reality hit her not as a tragedy, but as a physical blow. The game was over. The chessboard had been flipped. She had spent 3 years meticulously stealing my husband, my child, my parents, and my home, only to realize that the life support keeping her alive was the very woman she had driven into the grave. No, Isla gasped, clawing at Jackson's forearms. No. Call the National Registry. Put me on the emergency list. Jackson, you have millions. Bribe the board. Buy a kidney, buy marrow, do something. Jackson looked down at her hands on his skin. For 3 years he had found those hands delicate, tragic, and pure. He had held them in secret while I was folding laundry. He had kissed them in parking lots while I was at the cemetery. Now, looking at the long, pale fingers digging into his flesh, all he saw was the lighter fluid. I can't buy you a match, Isla, Jackson said, pulling his arms away with such sudden force that she fell back against the pillows. Science doesn't take bribes. By evening, the public confession Jackson had posted on social media had mutated into a nationwide viral wildfire. He had posted it to satisfy my condition, a desperate, transactional post meant to secure my cooperation for the surgery. He had intended to delete it the second the marrow was safely in Isla's foreline, to claim his account was hacked, to have his PR firm issue a retraction. He was too late. The post had over 400,000 shares. I, Jackson Reed, hereby confess to 3 years of systematic fraud against my wife, Summer Reed. I forged her signature on divorce documents in 2021. I concealed the survival of our biological son, Cooper Reed, and falsified his birth certificate to name Isla Bennett as the legal mother. I have maintained a continuous, fraudulent domestic partnership while keeping my wife under the belief that her child perished in the NICU. Below the confession, the local police department had added an official update. Press release. Investigation into fatal residential arson and suspicious hospital death at St. Jude's. 2 detectives from the Major Crimes Division were already waiting in the hallway outside Isla's room when Jackson stepped out. Mr. Reed? The senior detective, a woman with iron gray hair named Miller, showed her gold badge. We have a warrant to seize your mobile devices, the surveillance logs from the Crestview property, and we need you to accompany us to the station regarding the juvenile incident involving Cooper Reed. My mother, who had been sitting on the wooden bench with her head between her knees, shot up like a scalded cat. You can't take Cooper, she shrieked, lunging toward the detective. He's a baby. He didn't do anything. It was an accident. Tell them, Jackson. Detective Miller didn't even blink. She held up an evidence bag containing a half-melted yellow plastic lighter with a child's thumbprint lifted in black powder. Mrs. Reed, your grandson was interviewed by Child Protective Services 40 minutes ago in the presence of a court-appointed advocate, Miller said, her voice ice-cold. He demonstrated using anatomically correct dolls and a dollhouse, exactly how he applied lighter fluid to the curtains, how he turned the exterior deadbolt on the bedroom door, and stated that Mommy Isla said the bad lady had to go to sleep so we could go to Disneyland. My mother stopped dead in her tracks. She turned slowly, her neck creaking like rusted iron, to look at my father. My father was sitting on the floor against the wall, staring at his shoes. His hands were clasped over his ears, pressing so hard his knuckles were white, trying to block out the sound of the world he had built collapsing into the mud. She told him to do it, my mother whispered. The realization didn't come with tears, it came with a terrible, hollow rattling in her chest. Isla told that boy to burn my daughter alive. And you let her, Detective Miller said, gesturing to the 2 uniformed officers behind her. Mr. Reed, let's go. As they cuffed Jackson's hands behind his back, Cooper ran out of the waiting room, holding a half-eaten bag of gummy bears. Daddy, Cooper yelled, his face smudged with sugar. Where are you going? Are we going to Disneyland now? Is the bad lady gone? Jackson looked down at his son. For 4 years, he had looked at Cooper and seen the ultimate proof of his own benevolence, the child he had saved from Summer's grief, the golden boy who would unite his 2 lives into a perfect tapestry of domestic triumph. Now, looking at the child's bright, remorseless blue eyes, Jackson felt a cold, oily nausea rise in his throat. Get away from me, Jackson whispered. Cooper blinked, confused. Daddy. Get him away from me, Jackson roared, thrashing against the officer's grip, his face purple, tears and snot spraying from his lips. He killed her. Burned her lungs. Get him out of my sight. Get him away. Cooper burst into a terrified, shrill wail as the officers dragged Jackson toward the elevators. The boy reached for my mother, but my mother didn't scoop him up. She didn't press him to her chest. She backed away toward the wall, her hands raised in front of her as if the 4-year-old child were a venomous viper crawling across the floor. 3 days after my death, the medical examiner's office released the forensic audit of Isla Bennett's medical history. The subpoena had been issued as part of the homicide investigation into the fire, but what the detectives found in the archives of the Pacific Coast Women's Clinic was far more sinister than anyone had anticipated. Jackson sat in the interrogation room, his wrists raw from the steel cuffs, his expensive suit rumpled and smelling of jailhouse disinfectant. Detective Miller tossed a thick, yellowed medical file onto the metal table. Between them, "Page 12, Mr. Reed," Miller said, leaning back in her chair. "Read it." Jackson's hands shook as he opened the folder. Patient, Isla Rose Bennett. Age 19. Procedure, dilation and curettage following. Septic incomplete abortion. Complications, uterine perforation bilateral. Salpingectomy, severe pelvic inflammatory disease resulting in permanent, irreversible absolute sterility. Date, February 14, 2017. Jackson's eyes darted across the black and white text. He shook his head, a twitch developing beneath his left eyelid. "No," Jackson muttered. "This is wrong. The ski trip was in 2019. She was injured on Mount Hood. She fell into the crevasse trying to pull Summer's sled back to the trail. The doctors in Portland said the trauma to her pelvic wall." "There was no trauma on Mount Hood, Jackson," Miller interrupted, tapping a second document. "We pulled the mountain rescue incident report from that weekend. Summer slipped on a patch of ice and bruised her knee. Isla wasn't even on the trail. She was sitting in the Timberline Lodge drinking hot chocolate. She never touched a sled. She never fell." Jackson's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She had that medical report forged by a physician's assistant she was dating. In 2019, Miller continued with clinical precision. "She used your guilt to get the initial $10,000 from your wife. Then she used that same lie to justify moving into your firm, taking your business accounts, and ultimately convincing you to steal your own newborn child from the maternity ward." Miller leaned forward, her eyes boring into Jackson's hollow skull. "Summer didn't owe Isla a baby, Mr. Reed. Summer never owed Isla a single drop of water. You stole your wife's son and handed him to a woman who had been running a long con on your family for 7 straight years." Jackson sat frozen. In his mind, a kaleidoscope of memories shattered into jagged, bleeding shards. Isla crying softly on the hospital sofa, whispering, "It's okay, Jackson, as long as Summer is safe, my broken body doesn't matter." Isla holding Cooper for the first time, saying, "He looks like the baby I'll never have because of that mountain." My mother nodding solemnly in the kitchen, saying, "Summer owes this to her. It's justice." Justice. A sound tore from Jackson's throat, a high, bubbling, hysterical laugh that turned into a violent, hacking cough. He laughed until his forehead hit the cold steel of the table, tears pooling on the scratched gray metal. He had destroyed the only woman who ever loved him without a price tag. He had let his son set fire to her bedroom. He had stood by while she choked on her own blood on an operating table, all to pay a debt that had never existed. The house on Crestview Lane was not allowed to be cleaned. The local fire department had declared the structure an active crime scene, boarding up the front windows with raw plywood. Black, oily soot clung to the siding, and the smell of charred foam, burnt cotton, and melted plastic seeped out into the pristine suburban neighborhood. My parents didn't leave. They had nowhere else to go. Their friends from the country club had blocked their numbers within 12 hours of the social media confession. The local boutique where my mother had shopped for 30 years had canceled her account. When my father walked to the corner store to buy milk, the neighbors crossed the street, whispering behind their hands, pointing at the monsters who gave their daughter's baby away. Inside the dark living room, the power had been cut for evidence preservation. My mother sat on the floor by the fireplace, wrapped in a soiled trench coat, holding the silver charm bracelet the police had retrieved from the hospital trash can. She rubbed the small silver heart between her thumb and forefinger until the metal was hot. She asked me for soup, my mother muttered to the empty room. Her hair was unwashed, standing up in wild, gray tufts. The night before the surgery, she looked at me with those big eyes, just like when she had the chicken pox in 4th grade. She asked me, "Mom, what if I don't make it out?" My father sat on the sofa, his head in his hands. I told her she was being dramatic. My mother continued, her voice cracking into a jagged, rhythmic whisper. I told her not to be dramatic. I told her we'd be a happy family again. She began to hit herself. Thwack, thwack, thwack. She brought her open palm down against her own cheek, hard enough to leave dark red welts, rocking back and forth on the soot-stained rug. "Bad mother," she chanted, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "Bad, stupid, blind mother. You killed your baby. You killed your Summer." My father didn't stop her. He didn't even look up. In the small guest bedroom down the hall, Cooper was screaming. He had been crying for 6 hours straight. He had smashed every toy in the room. He had torn the wallpaper off the drywall in jagged strips. He had bitten his own forearm until it bled. "I want Mommy Isla," the boy shrieked, slamming his fists against the locked bedroom door. I hate this house. It smells like smoke. Let me out. I want to go to the beach. My father slowly stood up from the sofa. He walked down the dark hallway, his footsteps heavy, dragging his slippers across the debris. He stopped in front of the locked door. Shut up, my father said through the wood. I want mommy, Cooper screamed. You're a bad grandpa. I'll burn you too. I'll get the lighter and burn your bed. My father stood there for a long time, listening to the child's violent, unhinged curses echoing through the dark house. This was the boy they had chosen over me. This was the legacy they had sacrificed their daughter's sanity to protect. A feral, remorseless little monster who knew only how to demand, how to destroy, and how to burn. There is no mommy, my father whispered through the crack in the door. And nobody is coming to save you. In the terminal isolation ward of the county infirmary, Isla Bennett was dying. Because she had been named as a primary co-conspirator in the aggravated arson and fraudulent adoption cases, the district attorney had revoked her private hospital privileges. She had been transferred to the secured prison ward. A concrete room with a single barred window, a stainless steel toilet and an armed guard stationed outside the heavy iron door. Her blast count had surged to 92%. Without the stem cell transplant, her bone marrow had stopped producing red blood cells and platelets entirely. Her gums were bleeding continuously, dark purple hematomas covered her arms and neck like necrotic flowers. Every breath felt like inhaling crushed glass. The heavy iron door clicked open. Jackson walked in, wearing an orange correctional jumpsuit, his ankles shackled, together with a heavy iron chain that scraped along the floor. He was accompanied by 2 guards, who stood by the door with their hands on their holsters. Isla turned her head on the thin vinyl pillow. Her hair had started falling out, in clumps from the palliative radiation. Her skin was a translucent, greenish gray. When she saw him, her cracked, bloody lips moved, trying to form that familiar, pathetic pout. Jackson, she wheezed, her voice a wet, rattling hiss. You came tell them I need the morphine. The guards. They won't increase the drip. Jackson stopped at the foot of the iron cot. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the white hospital blanket pulled over her legs. The grand jury returned the indictment this morning, Isla, Jackson said. His voice was completely flat, devoid of anger, devoid of grief, devoid of anything resembling life. First-degree murder with special circumstances for summer. Solicitation of arson on an occupied structure. Fraudulent alteration of public records. Bigamy. Isla's fingers clawed weakly at the coarse cotton sheet. I'm dying, Jackson, she wept, blood leaking from the corner of her eye along with her tears. I won't survive until the trial. Why are you talking about indictments? Look at me, please hold my hand, just once. Jackson looked down at his own cuffed hands. Do you know where Summer is buried, Isla? He asked softly. Isla shook her head, her breath hitching in her chest. Nowhere, Jackson said. Her father refused to sign the release forms for the body because he said he didn't have the right to touch her. The state cremated her as an unclaimed decedent. Her ashes were scattered in the municipal memorial garden next to the highway. He took a step closer, his chains clinking against the iron frame of the bed. There is no headstone. There is no plot. There is nowhere for me to go to beg for forgiveness. He leaned down, his eyes hollow, empty sockets staring straight into her rotting soul. I hope it hurts, Isla, Jackson whispered. I hope every cell in your marrow screams while you suffocate. Because when you die, nobody is going to scatter your ashes. Nobody is going to say a prayer. You are going to rot in the state ground, and the only person who will remember your name is the prosecutor who reads your crimes into the record. Isla let out a high, strangling shriek, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror, as the cardiac monitor beside her bed began to squeal in ventricular tachycardia. Jackson. No. Don't leave me. Jackson. Jackson turned his back on the bed. He didn't look back as the nurses rushed through the door with the crash cart. He didn't look back as the defibrillator paddles were charged. He dragged his iron chains through the heavy steel door, stepping out into the cold, gray corridor of the penitentiary, listening to the flat, unending beep of the monitor fading into the distance. In the white, boundless void between dimensions, I sat on a bench carved from pure condensed light. Before me floated the translucent interface of the system. On the screen, the final statistical report was compiling in golden alphanumeric characters. World Mission Report. World number 409. Host status. Extraction 100% complete. Procreation objective, fulfilled. Biological lineage established. Target retribution index. 100%, absolute collapse of target social, legal, and biological ecosystems. System reward. 50,000 karmic units plus absolute bodily reconstruction. Host, the system's synthesized voice rang out, warmer and far more melodic than it had ever sounded during my 3 years of torment. The local timeline has concluded its primary convergence. Do you wish to review the terminal outcomes of the secondary entities before your memories are wiped for the next deployment? I leaned back against the bench of light, crossing my legs. My body was whole again. There were no burn scars on my skin. My lungs drew in clean, sweet, unburdened air that tasted of mountain pine and fresh rain. The dull, phantom ache in my pelvic bone from the delivery table was gone, erased by the clean architecture of the cosmos. Show me, I said softly. The screen divided into 3 distinct panes. In the first pane, Jackson Reed sat in the corner of an 8x10 solitary confinement cell at the state maximum security facility. He was 32 years old, but his hair was completely white. He had spent the last 8 months tracing the letters of my name into the concrete wall with the edge of an aluminum spoon, his fingertips worn down to the raw pink flesh. He didn't speak to the guards. He didn't eat the food. He spent his nights curled on the iron cot, weeping until his voice gave out, asking an empty room why he had ever walked away from the hospital door 3 years ago. In the second pane, the house on Crestview Lane was being demolished by a yellow excavator. The charred timbers cracked and groaned as the iron claw tore the master bedroom apart, sending clouds of black soot into the gray sky. Across the street, my parents sat in an old, rusted station wagon, their possessions packed into 3 cardboard boxes in the back seat. My mother was holding the silver charm bracelet against her cheek, her eyes vacant and unseeing, humming a discordant lullaby to an empty back seat. My father had lost his license to practice law. He worked 12-hour shifts as a night security guard at a commercial lumber yard, unable to sleep in the dark. In the third pane, Cooper sat in the recreational yard of the State Children's Psychiatric Institute. He was wearing a heavy canvas safety smock, his hands secured in soft restraint, mitts to prevent him from tearing at his own skin. He had no visitors. He had no friends. When the other children played with building blocks, Cooper sat alone in the gravel, staring at the perimeter fence with cold, dead eyes, whispering to the wind that he was going to burn the world down so his mommy would come back. I watched the screens for 2 minutes. I waited for the rage to surge. I waited for the lingering sting of betrayal, the bitter burn of grief, the urge to scream at the injustice of the 3 years they had stolen from me. Nothing came. The anger was gone. The pain was gone. The woman who had wept over an empty grave on the coast had dissolved into starlight, leaving behind only the cold, crystalline serenity of an immortal traveler who had seen 1,000 worlds rise and fall. They were not my family. They were not my husband, my parents, or my child. They were merely a collection of tragic, selfish actors who had written their own doom in the ink of their own greed, left behind to rot in the burning ruins of their own design. System, I said, rising from the bench of light, my white dress flowing around, my ankles like liquid silk. Yes, host? Wipe the local file, I said, looking toward the golden portal opening at the edge of the void, revealing a boundless horizon of blue skies, untouched oceans, and infinite possibilities. And take me to the next world. Command confirmed, the system chimed. Beginning memory purge in 3, 2, 1. The screens dissolved into golden dust, scattering into the ether like autumn leaves. I turned my back on the ashes of the past, stepped through the gate of light, and never looked back.